Christopher from Cleveland, Ohio asks, Kobe or Jordan? And now this is obviously a very popular question which will never ever ever go away. Not even when Kobe retires will this question go away. And it shouldn't. Kobe deserves to be in the conversation with Jordan as the very best shooting guards of all time and top 5 guards of all time as well. Now, this question has a different significance now based off Brandon Jennings' comments recently that Kobe is better than Jordan because Kobe had won with a weaker supporting cast. Now that depends because both had such long careers and such sustained eras of dominance and the supporting cast. I mean, Kobe won from 2000 to 2002, so a three-peat, and that was alongside Shaq. And he also won in 2009 and 2010. They also made the finals in 2008. So there's 2-3 year periods of him being at the very top. Jordan obviously won. He had 2 three-peats himself, from 91 to 93, and then 96 to 98. So those supporting casts changed. I think that's important to remember because Brandon Jennings doesn't elaborate onto which supporting cast Kobe had which year Kobe had a worse supporting cast than what Jordan did. Personally, I think the first three-peat for Jordan and the Bulls, they had a very well-rounded but not a dominant supporting cast. Jordan was absolutely beyond words in that finals and in that period. In the 91 finals, 31 points per game, well over 50% shooting. I think it was 56%. I could be wrong. 11.5 assists, 6.5 rebounds, nearly 3 steals, 1.5 blocks. You know, if maybe I should repeat these stats because to me that is a level that hasn't been seen since, and maybe we'll never see again. 31 a game, 55% shooting, 11.5 rebounds, 11.5 assists, 6.5 rebounds, 3 steals, 1.5 blocks. That is insane. That you cannot fill a stat sheet more than that. And his control of the game was impeccable. Remember, people might say, well, they had Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen was not a legit top 3 in that first period. Top 3 player in that first three-peat. In the second three-peat, absolutely. You could even make the argument that he was the second best player in the NBA behind Carmelo. But not in the first three-peat. He was still growing. He was still very young. He came into the league in 87, but he was raw. He was an all-star, yes. He was on the Dream Team, yes. But that was primarily to get Jordan on the Dream Team. But I don't accept that, well, he's a top 50 player, so therefore Jordan had a better supporting cast. Pippen became a top 50 player after Jordan left, and then when Jordan came back the second time. In the 92 finals, he absolutely destroyed Clyde Drexler. Remember, Clyde Drexler was considered the second. He was not the finals MVP, but the NBA MVP voting. Jordan number 1, Drexler number 2. There was people saying that Drexler was just as good as Jordan. Jordan smoked him. You know, obviously you remember the shrug game. Obviously, he also scored 46 in a critical and pivotal Game 5 in Portland when the series was tied at 2. Unbelievable. It was one of the most emphatic statements of dominance of an entire NBA, and it was only amplified by the fact that Magic, who had ruled the NBA for so long, was courtside for those games. And then we got the 93 finals, where he averaged, think about that, he averaged 41 against Barkley and the Suns. If a player scores 40 in the finals now, everyone jumps up and down, but Jordan averaged that. He averaged 41 in the finals. And that was against Dan Marley, Danny Ainge, Dumas, Kevin Johnson. These guys were on the perimeter defending him, and they couldn't stop him at all. He just put a clinic on getting to the rim. I said one of the previous questions that LeBron's the best at getting to the rim. Maybe I could rectify that because maybe Jordan in that period, in that finals series, showed that he was the best at getting to the rim and just putting on an absolute clinic of getting to the basket. I would be the. I think the Bulls were most dominant during their second three-peat, but that was because of the supporting cast, not necessarily because of Jordan. If anything, Jordan's game declined a bit in his second three-peat. He's still unbelievably good, but not his. He wasn't in his prime anymore. And as I said before, Pippen was now a top three player, probably the second best player in the entire league. Then you had Rodman, who was brilliant. And the East was weaker, especially after Shaq had bolted to LA, which we'll talk about when we talk about Kobe. But that kind of shows you that the supporting cast in the first repeat wasn't as good as it was in the second. Because Jordan wasn't the same player, and yet they were more dominant. Now, I mentioned Shaq leaving Orlando. He went to LA, obviously. And the Lakers were their most dominant when Shaq was the franchise. People forget how good he really was. He was maybe the most dominant player of all time. You just look at how he terrorized the NBA from 2000 to 2001. Kobe was. You could argue Kobe was the second best player in the league at that time. I would go with Duncan, but if you say Kobe, I'm not really going to argue that. Just remember the numbers that I ran off during Jordan's first three-peat. Now let's compare those to Kobe's in '08, because I think Shaq in that first repeat was much better than much better than what Pippen was during the Bulls' first repeat. So if we're going to accept that the supporting cast we're talking about supporting cast. See, this is where it gets tricky. We're talking about supporting cast, so we have to talk about when the supporting cast were at their weakest. So I think the supporting cast of the Bulls in the first repeat is the one you can compare to with the Lakers' second run towards the end of the 2000s. Now let's compare Kobe from that period to Jordan in that first repeat. Okay, Kobe in '08, which is when they lost. 26 points per game, 40% field goals, 4.7 rebounds, 5 assists per game, 2.7 steals. 2009, 32 points per game, 43% shooting, 7.5 assists, 5.6 rebounds, 1.6 steals. 2010, 28 points per game, 40% shooting, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Kobe's numbers are huge. But this is a consistent theme, a consistent narrative to when the Kobe and Jordan discussions is no matter how good Kobe was, he just couldn't get over the hump of Jordan. He never really took it to the next level. Jordan, as I said, you compare that to the numbers I ran off before in the 91 finals. 31 points per game on 36% shooting. 11.5 assists, 6.7 rebounds. Think about the shrug game against Drexler. Think about how he also dropped 46 on Drexler in a very significant Game 5 in Portland, no less. And then he follows it up with 41 points per game. Kobe was fantastic. There's no question about that. But to say that Kobe was better because he won with less, well, that's like saying, well, Hakeem Olajuwon's the best player of all time. And I will never accept that Hakeem Olajuwon is the best player of all time because there's so many other factors. I'll accept that Hakeem was very dominant, especially in the 95 run, which had a better supporting cast than the 94 because they had Drexler now. In 94, they had no one. They had Otis Thorpe and a bunch of role players. In 95, they had those role players minus Otis Thorpe, and they had Clyde Drexler, who was still a ridiculously good player at that time. I think it's such a troll comment, and maybe Brandon Jennings is looking for a job at ESPN because that's the kind of stuff that they say to sort of get some kind of attention. But the reality is Jordan was far superior. You could have put Jordan on the Monstars from Space Jam, and he still would have been better than Kobe. And just because you had a weaker supporting cast and you won in a weaker era doesn't mean you were a better player. It's borderline ridiculous. And that's not to insult Kobe. Kobe deserves all the credit he gets. But he's not in the same stratosphere as Jordan. He's not in the same universe as Jordan. Well, he is, but now I'm trolling. But when you compare them, Jordan was that much better. They're quite frankly, they're in different echelons. And Kobe is still top 10, maybe top 5. I wouldn't put him in the top 5. I'd put him in the top 10 of all time. But that's the difference between Jordan and Kobe, and that's how dominant Jordan was.